So Charizard is getting some surprise nerfs. This is interesting because Charizard needs some surprise buffs. Hi, Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw! Let's talk about what's going on with Charizard and actually why this may not be as bad as we think. But then again, I mean, for Charizard players, things are always kind of bad. El Chico Eevee posted this tweet, and it's a data mine from the public test server where he found out that they added make damage as once as new in Pokemon Unite skills, and it seems to be true for some basic attacks. The Squirtle line, Charmander line, Rowlet line, Lapras, and Phalanx. So what does all of this mean and why did they do it? So first off, I'll tell you what this means. This means that an auto attack that does multiple instances of damage will count as one. And the real reason they are doing this is because of the item Muscle Band. Muscle Band specifically works with your auto attacks, and some Pokemon can take great benefit of the fact that a single auto attack will do multiple hits of damage. It's very few, but a couple do, and one of them is Charizard. Charizard is like the reason Muscle Band was changed in the first place, which I'll talk about here in a moment.
Taking a look at this footage right here between the current live game and the public test server, you can see how much less damage Charizard is doing. Now, part of that, of course, is because Muscle Band does damage based on max HP, so this isn't an exact representation of what's going to happen with Char, but what you're going to be able to see with a clip like this is that Charizard is doing way less damage because Muscle Band is proccing less and less and less. This clip is going to start over as you're looking at it. But again, this is a big damage change for Charizard for sure.
First off, shout out to Evokron for helping me understand all of this and also reminding me of the history of why Muscle Band is where it is in the first place. Let's actually talk about that really quick because it's pretty interesting. So the reason Muscle Band is so good and has been used by so many different Pokemon is not because of its attack speed, not because of the attack stat it gives you, but because of its passive ability where your auto attacks are going to do extra damage to your enemies. At level 20, the Muscle Band will do extra damage equal to 3% of the enemy's remaining HP. This is great for, ripping down wild Pokemon, or it's great for a lot of auto attack Pokemon, especially Pokemon who attack at range, being able to do a ton of damage against tankier Pokemon. It's why for the longest time before things like Choice Specs and Cursed Incense were around, you would see items like this run on Pikachu. You still see items like this run on Eldegoss. There are so many ranged Pokemon that do so well with this item. This item now has an internal cooldown inside of it so that you're not able to proc it multiple times per a single hit, except again for a few cases, one of them being Charizard, and Charizard is actually the reason this item was changed. Originally, this item had no internal cooldown at all, so Charizard with a Muscle Band would get Muscle Band procs on every single tick of its Flame Breath, and it was absolutely insane, crazy overpowered, and they fixed it in like a week. They changed it so that Muscle Band has an internal cooldown, and that essentially was only because of Charizard. There are a few Pokemon like Dragapult, Cinderace, Razorleaf, Decidueye that actually attack fast enough so that the internal cooldown of Muscle Band affects them as well, but in general, this was set up because Char was doing too much damage with Muscle Band. And now on the public test server, Charizard will only get one proc of that extra damage with Muscle Band. Does it mean Charizard will not use Muscle Band anymore? It's hard to say because we're gonna have to see what it's like in game. One thing for sure, this is a nerf to almost no other Pokemon except for Charizard and most likely Phalanx. This is the reason they're using it, so that all your little troops, I think that they call them, that kind of pop off when you throw them at enemies, won't be able to proc your Muscle Band 8 million times in a row, and therefore you won't be able to burst down objectives or anything like that as fast as you could if you had Muscle Band on. I have to assume this is the biggest reason for this change, while they do have other Pokemon that have multi-hits also listed in there. Now, this could mean a few things. Let's first talk about what it could mean for Charizard. As I'm sure you know, Charizard does alright as a solo Pokemon. It's not terrible, and it's also not amazing. I would say it's like kind of middle of the road, much better in solo queue than any other form of gameplay. In duos and trios, especially 5 stacks and competitive play, Charizard sees less and less and less play. It also seems like a Pokemon that does very, very well against inexperienced players players, while experienced players can really exploit what Charizard is doing and shut it down a lot easier. Char's in a weird state in Pokemon Unite, and I would say there's no question currently that Charizard already could use some buffs. That being said, this does feel like an inadvertent nerf to Charizard that they were, I think, trying to hit Phalanx with, but once again, something bad happened for Char. They take his true damage, and now they take this. So what could happen to Char? First of all, them doing this would hopefully make them realize that the reason that they actually changed Muscle Band in the first place was because of Charizard. And given that we've taken away Charizard's true damage, and now we're taking away some of the extra damage Charizard can get with its autos, we have to assume that they're going to change something with Char. They have to have Char buffs coming. If they don't, Charizard will be in the worst state it's ever been in Pokemon Unite. I'm just hoping that they remember the reason they changed Muscle was because of Char. So now that this Muscle won't work at all really for Char, it'll just be one instance of the Muscle Band proc, we are definitely going to need some Char buffs, and we already needed some Char buffs. Now let's talk about a theory that Evokron was telling me about what might be happening with Muscle Band. His theory is that it's possible they're removing the Muscle Band internal cooldown. So they're taking certain Pokemon and they are changing it to having their autos count as 1 tick of damage, but Muscle Band is going to lose its internal cooldown, which actually means certain Pokemon, like the ones I mentioned before, Cinderace, Decidueye Razor Leaf, Dragapult, things that attack so fast that you actually would get multiple procs of Muscle Band, will actually benefit from that change. Now that change is not yet on the public test server, but it absolutely could be coming. They're changing the way a few Pokemon work, but then they're reverting Muscle Band to how Muscle Band used to work. My theory is likely that they will not change Muscle Band. They will change this on the public test server and then bring it into the game. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes these changes make it into the main game. And because of that, we will have to see Char buffs because they will have hurt Char again for no great reason, except for they're trying to deal with an issue that they have created with Phalanx. Without question, we should walk away from this change with mostly everything being the same and a buff for Charizard. I would love to hear what you think about this proposed change in the comments. Again, I think this whole thing is set up so that they can make Phalanx and all the little troops that you're able to throw with Phalanx work. And at the same time, it's just an unfortunate, inadvertent nerf to Charizard that I'm hoping they will fix. And by the way, they just need to buff Charizard in general. Let's say none of this was happening. I've talked about this on a lot of tier lists. We could really use some Charizard buffs. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. Shout out to Evokron and El Chico Eevee for finding this. I love you all, and I will see you all next time. Buff Charizard. Yeah, and we should.